Can I, am I
Let's
able
bring
to
him
open up the door?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we've got some CD.
Over in the corner, sorry.
My chair here.
Am I in the corner going food?
No, yeah.
Here's a chair here, there's a chair in the corner and another one here.
Oh, yeah.
So glad you're All right, we are live, so I would like to get the meeting started. So we'll, do we have enough chairs, Chief? One here. We've got one here. Somebody come around. All right. Okay, I want to welcome those online, and those in the room to the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board public meeting. We have, first of all, I would ask co-chair also to do the territorial acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair. It is always a great privilege and a pleasure to be able to sit at the beginning of any gathering and to take a moment to reflect on the extraordinary opportunities that are before us all, and the heavy responsibilities that's attached to be able to do our work and raise our families here in the territories of the Lekwungen people, Songhees Nation and the Kusapsa Nation as they reclaim their traditional land. I urge all of us at some point during our daily activities to take a moment and reflect not just on those words, but to experience or hear, or think, or sing, or do something that brings home to you how important those opportunities are to each of you as individuals and with your families. With that, I urge each of you as well to learn a little bit of language and to stumble, as I do often, from something which means Echkasian and Ahulia. I greet you with an open heart and an open mind, come to you in peace.
Thank you. All right, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? I see none. And so I would ask for an adoption of the public agenda.
I have an amendment.
Yes, Elizabeth?
I'd like to amend the agenda. I noticed that there's no chief constable report on this agenda, and I would like to ask that we add that. And we ask Chief Manning to give a verbal report on the events that happened on July 11th in Canberra and the work that's underway to ensure the public safety and the safety of all of our first responders.
All right, so you're moving the agenda with that amendment. Is there a seconder? Paul. Okay, and all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion is carried. We'll add that as item H under standing items, which normally we would have a chief constable's report. And because of the presentation today, we looked through the agenda and tried to pare it down. And then all sorts of things have happened this last week and it got built up again. So we'll add it anyway. Okay, all those in favor, I did that. All right, and we have the, next up, we have the presentation with regard to our letter to the Human Rights Commissioner, pardon me, Kasari Govinder, and I think I'm welcoming you on screen, Ms. Govinder. Thank you for being here, and we will start first of all with a presentation, words from the chief, and then we will go to our MIST representative, and then we will come to you, Ms. Govinder. Go ahead, Chief.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Just Commissioner, can you just, I want to make sure you've got good audio, give me a thumbs up and. Can you hear us okay?
It's mostly okay. Every once in a while, someone fades out a bit or gets a bit fuzzy, but I think I can hear you fine. Thank you for checking.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Chair. I think if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is, we've got from our mobile youth services team, the youth and family counselor, Mia Golden, who this board is well aware of. And so she is gonna talk a little bit about the current state of what is she is seeing with her and her partner, Constable Gordon McGee, who's part of the MIST team. And the primary focus of that team is to really look and help high-risk youth, exploited youth, and make sure that we have early interventions to help support youth in our community. And that, of course, involves students within SD 61. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to just ask Mia to start, and then I may have some comments at the end of her presentation. Thank you, Chair. Mia?
Thank you. I will try and speak with some volume. So as Chief Manick said, I'm the counselor half of the Mobile Youth Services team. I've been in this position for the last 10 years. And prior to that, have worked as a youth and family counselor in various programs, including family violence, young sex offenders. That is what the title was. So that back then, so that gives you an indication of my age, and parenting programs. Gord and I are extremely busy. We deal with exploitation, so that is online exploitation, sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and gang recruitment. When I first began in this position, we were busy, but nowhere near what we're seeing today. So the numbers of youth that we're serving have increased dramatically. The intensity of the work has increased dramatically, and it's only been made more intense and more challenging since the removal of the school liaison officers. When I first began, I would often end up working quite closely with the SLOs. I would be in the schools meeting with youth for some individual counseling sessions, and I would see the SLOs down the halls, in the gym, outside, chatting with students. The feel was always very positive. You would see that they were actively relationship building. You could see that they were really focused on building that rapport. One of the things that I've noticed over the years with the school liaison officers is that most of them are parents. So they have a true understanding of what children needs, what to look for when they're being, triggered, when they're having a bad day. They truly understand that, and that came out in their work. I remember, again, I'm dating myself, but this is many, many years ago, when I was in a different program, the Saanich department, the school liaison team had hockey cards, and they kept having to remake them because the kids kept wanting more and more and more. So historically, the school liaison officers have always been a really positive experience in SD 61. I have just got to look at my notes to make sure that I'm keeping on track. One of the things that I also got to experience, which most people don't have this experience, at least coming from a counselor's lens, is to see the behind the scenes that goes into what school liaison officers do. So there's the face-to-face, there's the building rapport, there's the presentations that one expects. But what you also see was, I would attend the school district and liaison meetings. And what I saw is the dedication and the focus on not only students who may be struggling for whatever reason, but in terms of the overall needs and safety of the students. So, you know, lockdowns, where were the vulnerabilities in the schools? How could things be shifted to increase safety? So all of these little pieces, and you could really see how passionate these members were around making sure that the students in their schools were protected. So in terms of what we're seeing out in the streets right now, I'm gonna talk first about gangs. So gangs have always had a bit of a presence here in Victoria. We've known that. Some have come and gone, some have been sort of youth gangs, and some have been adults with more nefarious plans. In about recently, we have gangs from the mainland. We have Red Scorpions, we have all kinds. But the gang that has been really causing a challenge with respect to youth as of late has been the Brothers Keepers. And I started first noticing them just before COVID. I think it was either 2018 or 2019. A couple of members had been sent to Wilkie, and they discovered, oh, Victoria, this is a great place. It's untouched. We will start recruiting. Initially, they were recruiting the young people that we worked with that were more street entrenched. After COVID, we've seen a significant shift. And in the last year and a half, especially, is when we saw a complete change in who they were targeting. So I am assuming they made this shift because the youth who are street entrenched were struggling with significant addictions. And so from a business model, if your dealers are using the supply, they're not going to make a whole lot of money. So they started targeting our young children. They are in our high schools, they are in our middle schools, and we have started seeing grooming behaviors in our elementary schools. I've received calls from school principals, text messages with photos of these adults who are from the mainland. It's Surrey-based. A photo that a principal takes either of the individual themselves or their vehicles in parking lots, but they've been walking into the schools. In one incident, the principal, who is a tall, athletic man, approached the BK member and said, may I help you? And the response was no, and he just kept walking deeper into the school. So there's a knowledge that SD 61 doesn't have school liaison officers, and so it makes it a much easier landscape to control. The amount of children that we are trying to support who are now recruited by gangs is overwhelming. Like I can't tell you how many families are struggling. Their children owe significant debt, huge amounts of money. Some families have been paying thousands and thousands of dollars to these gangs to try and get their child out of debt for one, and out of the gang. A few months ago, we worked with a family where it was identified that the youth was at such significant risk that there was no other alternative than to get them out of the country. And so in this case, the family had the ability to do so. And so that was the decision that was made. So this isn't just a one-off here and there. The numbers are high. The schools are calling us constantly with fears of what's going on with their students. It's overwhelming. So that is just from the gang landscape. One of the things that I know has come up is the issue around sort of the police to pipeline narrative. And this may not be a popular thing for me to say, but at least here in Victoria, that is, well, it's ridiculous. It's not what is happening at all. For one, our youth criminal justice system is set up support-based. So we have children who are engaging in numerous criminal activities. You know, whether it's in or out of school, they're not getting charged. There's, you know, restorative justice. The focus is not punitive for youth. The focus is support. So even in cases where students or, well, youth, I'm not seeing this so much within, you know, well, no, that's not true. The focus is support. For a child to come under charges, they have a long history of engaging in behaviors that are not serving them at all and are actually increasing their risk. One of the things that we are seeing more and more is around sexual violence that young people are experiencing. We attribute a lot of that to their exposure to what they're seeing online, whether it's going into the dark web, whether it's pornography. We are seeing huge shifts in young people's baselines around sexual activities and sexual violence, to the point that we have kids who are suicidal because of their inability to shift what they're ruminating about. They are acting out on their peers. The threats and the sexual coercions that are taking place, not only outside of school, but in schools. The amount of schools and parents that have contacted us complaining about their children's inability to go to the washroom because they are afraid. And this is not just one school, this has been across the board. We're hearing this from school after school after school after school, and not just SD 61, it's everywhere. So I'm guessing this is probably not even just a Victoria issue. It's probably everywhere, but children are literally not using the washroom because of the fear of what kind of harm will take place when they go to the bathroom. One of the things that has come up repeatedly is how many children we get calls about from either school counselors or parents where a disclosure has been made, but there is a fear to move forward. So this is a very underreported situation, whether it's around the gang recruitment or whether it's around bullying, harm, assaults. Children are afraid to come forward. Sometimes it's because they're afraid of the system, and sometimes it's because they're afraid that they will get in trouble by their parents. So there's a myriad of reasons why they are, but it is very underreported. So when we look at numbers that we know compared to numbers that are on the system, they don't match. One of the things that has come up repeatedly is how the solution is to have more counselors and less police. I'm a counselor. I, of course, believe in my profession. I think we do wonderful work, but it's akin to asking an accountant to fly a plane. They are two very different professions. They come with very different needs. And as far as school counselors, the majority of school counselors, the focus is not trauma counseling. They don't set up like a private practice. They don't have the youth coming in to do weekly trauma work. That is not their mandate. Their mandate is scheduling, career goals, basic check-ins, but it is not counseling as people often think it is. The counselors call us. Whenever there's an issue, the counselors call us. So we are the ones who are supporting the counselors. We are the ones who are supporting the parents. And I can do my part, and then my partner, who's the police officer, does his part, which is significant. The amount of protective factors that have been put in place that I would not have been able to if I was not working in this position with my partner who is able to do these things. We would have so many more youth who would still be being exploited by their predators, who would still be engaging in significant criminogenic behaviors. It is because of the work that my police partner is able to do, and that is part of our success. Right. One of the things that has been really significant is children need to know that there is safety out there. And right now, at least in our lifetime, children have never had such lack of safety, both emotionally and physically, than what is happening right now. We have children who have access to anything they want 24/7. And on the flip side, we have predators who have a portal to these young people. So even when parents think that their children are asleep, what we're hearing is that the child is up at 3 a.m. talking to some predator who is grooming them. These predators are very skilled, extremely, extremely skilled, to the point that, you know, I talked about the sexual violence that is taking place. Well, now there's a new trend that we've uncovered. I don't know how many people, you all know what a map is. So usually when we talk about maps, it's a thing that you pull out. Most of us don't use them anymore because we have GPS. But a map is actually, to young people, a minor attracted person. And so when children and youth talk about maps, there is no look of shock. There is no, it's just normal. They're just talking to a pedophile. So they don't make that connection because of the grooming that has taken on by this pedophile, and that for them it's just part of the LGBTQ spectrum. They are trying to hitch themselves on so that it is normalized. So youth who are growing up with social media and being messaged by pedophiles are looking at this as normalized. So now we not only have pedophiles who are grooming and targeting young people for photos and sexual videos of the youth themselves. Now the trend is that they are involving and starting to indoctrinate the young person right as they are entering puberty and having, you know, developmentally typical curiosities about sexuality and sex and all that comes with it. These predators are grooming them to indoctrinate them into the world of pedophilia. And so they are sending young people photos and videos of young children in sexualized violent images. And so we are having young people conditioned to have a shift in their own sexual health and sexual hygiene. Initially, we thought this was a one-off, but we are hearing this more and more from other youth. And in one instance, I spoke with somebody from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection and talked about this. And I said, "Are you seeing this?" And they said, "Absolutely." And I've checked with other organizations and they are also seeing it. So again, the need for education, the need for children to understand the risks that are involved and how important online safety is, and how having somebody to talk to about it, to ask questions, is critical. So now when we get disclosures, they come from the a school counselor. In the past, when school liaison officers were involved, we had disclosures straight to the police who were right in their schools. The trust was there. They knew that it was a safe person that they could talk to. They would get the full information of what their options were, what a disclosure looks like, what is the process, what are their rights. They don't have that now. Now what they have is a fear of the people who have always been established to keep children safe. So at a time when there is so much accessibility to children, when we just came off of COVID, so there's all this, it was scary times. Children more than ever need to know that there is a safety net. And right now, because of this narrative, they don't know that there is a safety net. So we have children walking around in fear with nowhere to go. And I don't know about anybody else, but for me, that is horrifying because I know what the trajectory is in terms of trauma if children don't have a safety net. Children in the past had that. They don't have that anymore. And then I think I'll end with the issue of racism. I'm a Black woman, and I'm a counselor. And there was this narrative that people of color, Black, Indigenous, people from various other racial groups, that that they are targets of the police, that they don't trust police, and that they are triggered by police. That is the narrative that is being spread. So I want to address this. There is nothing more racialized than keeping those of us who are Black, Indigenous, people of color in our supposed station. And by that, I mean, for this narrative to be given any sounding board, to be integrated into our social media for young children and youth to take it as gospel and to carry on spreading this agenda and further indoctrinate our communities, then yes, we will continue to remain in this less than position, because that is exactly what this narrative is suggesting, that we are victims, that we are less than, and that we are not able to speak for ourselves. Keeping us in the victim role and mindset allows individuals who wish to remain in the power position, or maybe they want to be saviors, to those of us who can't possibly assimilate into the rest of standard societal expectations. But it keeps us in a place where there is no ability to bridge those relationships and to demonstrate that that is in fact not the case. We live in Victoria, a fairly non-diverse city. It's definitely gotten, better since I moved here in '94. But still it's primarily white. And as a result, most of the people engaging in harming others, harming themselves, or committing criminal acts are white. That's our demographic. And I'll keep coming back, for us as a society to indoctrinate our children into this narrative that increases the likelihood of harm is mind-boggling to me. When this discussion first came, and it became clear that the board has held on to this narrative. And never once did they reach out to myself or my work partner despite my presenting a different view, never once did I get a call beyond the 5 minutes that I had to speak, and clearly I have more than 5 minutes to speak on this. But never once did they reach out to see what the reality of our work was. To see if their bias matches the reality of our experience. And I understand that it's human nature to save face. I understand that. Nobody likes to be called out on maybe making a mistake or not knowing the full picture. But at what cost are we going to stand on a viewpoint that isn't matching what the community is telling you? Because for me, my norm is For me, my norm is children dying, children committing suicide, children being assaulted, children going through horrific things. So if that is an acceptable outcome, then I guess the status quo will work. We don't have many tools in our systems, not for CFD, not for police, not for the justice system, to support these youth and families. This is one piece that we can do that is preventative, that touches on so many things that I've spoken to today, that will have a positive impact for children of tomorrow. If we keep it like it is, I am so afraid of what the children that fall in this generation right now, what their future is like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, for your honesty and your bravery and for speaking so clearly to all of us. I know that you wanted to say a few words and then move off for the other commission.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Chair. Again, Mia, let me just echo the Chair's comments. I know you put your heart and soul into what you do, and you're doing amazing work. You're literally doing God's work, and you're short-staffed and overwhelmed at what you're seeing in our schools. But I appreciate the honesty and you being able to deliver such a powerful message. So thank you for that, and the work that you and Gord are doing out in our communities. Just the comments that I had just through you, Chair, is I just wanted to touch on one thing, that I believe there is a path forward. I don't think it has to be one or the other. Are there voices that are traumatized at the police, at seeing a uniform or seeing an officer wearing a gun? Probably there are. But I think what we have to do is we have to just acknowledge what our current situation is in our community here in Greater Victoria, in SD 61 schools. And I think that that's what needs to be addressed, while also listening to some of those other voices and coming to a compromise. I don't believe there has to be one or the other. And the final comment that I wanted to say, Mia touched on this a little bit, is the general consensus, and Commissioner, you kind of touched on it in your letter. You called it, there are civilian alternatives to SLOs. And you talked about civilian coaches, youth counselors, substance use educators, and so on. And I think all of those resources are extremely important to be in our schools. But I think what you're hearing, and I hope that you take away from this presentation, is that the police also belong there. We have a role, as Mia suggested that the police are professionals in what we do. We do not replace, and never have we ever said we're mental health workers, social workers, or school counselors. But also, school counselors and mental health workers and social workers cannot do the work of what the police do. We are professional in what we do. I want to share with you that our officers are highly trained. They have fair and impartial policing, which is known as bias-free policing. All of our officers have taken trauma-informed practices of how to approach, how to interview, how to build those relationships. And we are a resource and have been a very productive resource in the community for the school. So when worrisome behaviors present themselves, not to the level of a criminal offense that's occurred, that's too late. And I think you're hearing that from Mia, but it's having it being in the schools with those positive relationships. We have been traditionally a resource for the school to use when it was most appropriate. And again, we're in that area of expertise that only the police have, and we can help guide that, dealing with those worrisome behaviors before they become more serious and more prevalent. And that is, I think, what we're missing the most in SD 61 schools. And we're really looking for your support. And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts and what your comments are based on what you've heard from Mia's presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before I go to the Commissioner Board, I want to offer you an opportunity to ask any questions of either Mia or the Chief with regard to the presentation.
I may have some comments, after we hear from the Commissioner, so I'll pause at the moment. But if I may, Chair, I noticed that we have Minister Rob Fleming, the MLA for Victoria Swan Lake here, and I just wanted to say welcome to Rob here for coming to this meeting.
Thank you. And welcome, Minister. Okay, Commissioner, we've poured our hearts out to you. You can hear that there's a lot of concern here, and we welcome the opportunity to hear from you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. I appreciate hearing from you and the opportunity to be here for sure. I just flagged that I think we maybe had different agendas. So I had been told I just had a few minutes to present here. So I've kept my comments fairly short. What I may do is given the breadth of issues that were raised, may follow up with a further correspondence to be able to cover sort of, again, the breadth of issues that were raised. But I do want to acknowledge that I'm joining today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples over here in Vancouver. And I really appreciate the board's flexibility. I know there was just a last minute change. I had a family issue arise that meant that I needed to stay in town. So I was looking forward to being there with you in person, and I apologize for not being able to do that. I'm very happy to have had the invitation to be here with you. I think there has been a number of kind of misunderstandings of the position that I and my office have taken on these issues, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to engage in a real conversation about it and the honesty in which we're all kind of bringing to the table in the spirit on that. I want to begin by emphasizing that I think it's very clear that we are all starting from the same place in this conversation. And that is that we all want our schools to be safe places for young people to learn and to build their sense of belonging and community. It's clear that's the roots of what you're saying, and it is absolutely at the heart of my position here as well. I think it's important to recognize that common starting ground and to understand where we diverge, which is, I think, in how we achieve this goal. My starting point is always that policy must be based in the evidence to avoid bias, stereotyping, and reinforcing systemic discrimination. And it must be based on the evidence in order to be effective. So I want to be clear that this is in no way an ideological stance against police. This is about taking an evidence-based approach to the best ways to protect children's safety, well-being, and human rights. And we know that policing decisions in particular must be evidence-based to keep us all equally safe. And that's why my office undertook extensive research on equity issues in policing. And based on what we found in this research, excuse me, including the fact that there are significant gaps in the evidence supporting SLO programs, my recommendations regarding these programs are as follows. So first of all, that school boards should end SLO programs unless they can demonstrate an evidence-based need for them that cannot be met through other means. In making this assessment, school boards must center the impact of continuing SLO programs on Indigenous, Black, and other student populations, such as young people with disabilities. And I want to clarify here that what we're talking about is the opposite of removing voices, the opposite of silencing young people who are marginalized or racialized or living with disabilities. What we're talking about here, the call to action is about centering those voices. It's about really listening to the young people who are directly impacted and doing research that puts those voices and those communities at the center of that research. The call to action in our 2021 report called Equity is Safer was calling on the province to undertake this important work to assess the value and the harms of SLO programs. The psychosocial and educational roles of SLOs, in my view, should be reassigned to civilians with experience, as we've heard, in child and youth counseling and leading extracurricular activities. I couldn't agree more that these professions are very different from policing, and that's exactly why we're asking for them to be replaced by not police actors, but actors who have expertise in these exact issues. I want to be clear that canceling SLO programs does not hinder valid investigations or responses to criminal activity. This continues to be, of course, the appropriate role of police. This conversation is about their role in schools simply to build relationships in uniform, armed, and that's the question here, not whether there is the ability of police to investigate gang activity. We can all take that. We can also agree that there is a role for police in investigating gang activity. This is about the relationship building piece of officers in schools. So I make this recommendation for additional research because we have a significant gap in our data here in BC. That is, there is no credible or comprehensive BC-specific research that puts the perspectives of young people who are racialized or disabled at the center of their analysis about the value of SLO programs. However, we're not without any information at all. As I mentioned, in fall of 2021, we released our report called Equity is Safer, which is a research report identifying systemic racism in certain policing activities in BC. In what we believe to be the largest study of policing data ever done in the country, we found significant racial disparities affecting Indigenous and Black people, and to a lesser extent, Arab or West Asian people and Hispanic people, specifically in relation to arrests or detentions and police-involved mental health incidents. For example, Black people are grossly overrepresented in arrest statistics in Vancouver. They are 5.3 times more likely to be arrested than their presence in the population would predict. I'm using Vancouver here. We did look at 5 police jurisdictions. Indigenous people are 17 times more likely to be arrested in Vancouver. Indigenous and Black people are far more overrepresented in public disorder offenses and administration of justice charges than charges involving serious violence. They also are overrepresented in proactive policing practices, not just responsive policing practices, demonstrating the role of bias and stereotyping in this disproportionate numbers that are showing up in the research. Behind the numbers are people and communities who experience real harm as a result of discriminatory policing. We cannot forget how deeply individuals and communities feel this harm and the enduring consequences that can flow from interactions with police and the criminal justice system. Given these numbers, we know that Indigenous, Black, and other racialized children are witnessing their communities having disproportionately negative interactions with police, and therefore may well have well-founded fears about the police themselves. I want to emphasize here that ignoring the impacts of racism doesn't make it go away. There's a phrase about being colorblind. Being colorblind, pretending that race doesn't have this impact, and racism in particular doesn't have this impact in policing, doesn't actually make these numbers different. It just makes it so we can't see it and we can't address it. So indeed, those fears that I spoke about that young people may have are well borne out from research in other jurisdictions. For example, research in 2020 in the US suggests that when faced with the same behavioral infractions, school liaison officers are more likely to arrest or charge Black students, while white students are more likely to be cautioned or diverted into an informal conflict resolution or treatment program. Also, youth with disabilities, those, for example, who identify as having a learning or behavioral disorder, constitute a disproportionate number of the school-based arrests. Conversely, I am not aware of any comprehensive evaluation data about SLOs creating a safer environment in schools, especially for those particular communities. We've just heard anecdotal evidence, but I think it's quite telling that what we didn't hear in that is comprehensive, credible data to back that up. For example, any data used to show that crime rates involving youth went up this year do not show that the cancellation of the SLO programs was responsible for this. And that's a classic fallacy where correlation is mistaken for causation. But in fact, we have no evidence about the impact of this canceled program. All of this data, or this lack of data, taken together is enough to raise a serious and reasonable concern that SLO programs might cause more harm than good. But as I hope you heard today from me, my call to action is entirely focused on making evidence-based decisions to ensure our children's safety, well-being, and human rights. I'm confident that we are all on the same page, as I mentioned, about wanting to keep children safe and respect their rights. I'm sure we can also agree that our justice and policing decisions must be rooted in fact and evidence rather than anecdote, hyperbole, or moral panic. In my view, then, there is only one conclusion to reach. In order for these programs to run, SLOs must be proven to be effective in addressing harms to children and not causing harms to children. We need to do the research to get that evidence and pause potentially harmful activities in the meantime. I made this recommendation to the legislature and to the provincial government 2.5 years ago, and still no action has been taken. To protect the safety and the human rights of our children, our duty is to act now. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to any questions or discussion that may follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will look to board members. Are there any questions? Paul.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Paul Farrow. I'm a recent new board member of Victoria Swinell Police Board. My background, I'm the former president of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, British Columbia Division. We may have met in my previous role. I've put a lot of thought into this meeting today. I'm glad you're here. And I have read your November 24th, 2022 letter to the BC School Trustees Association probably 100 times. And every time I read it, I have to scratch my head and I have a whole bunch of questions and comments about it. And your opening line, Commissioner, in your letter, you and I acknowledge your statutory responsibility is to promote the human rights in this province. And I'm sure, Commissioner, you would understand that this board has a statutory responsibility to provide policing service and to ensure that everyone is safe in our community. And unfortunately, your November 25th letter is preventing us to do that work. As effectively, your letter is the sole reason why there are no school police liaison officers in School District 61. It's your letter. You asked for data, you asked for facts. You just had a half an hour presentation from somebody on the ground telling you over and over what is happening in the schools. I think we have the facts. And what I heard are students are not safe in this school district. And what's really got me troubled and got me worked up is, and you acknowledged the Commissioner, and I appreciate it, is that you said there is no data out there. I know that you funded the Samuels Wortley report that I have read. It's been my bedtime reading for the last little while. And in that report clearly says that in Canada, there is no reports that backing up the effect of school police liaison officers. But what I was most troubled with is in that report, it links to research from the National Center for Education Statistics. And it's titled a report, Indicators of School Crime and Safety. And it's a 280-page report, which I have reviewed. And what I'm really concerned about here is in that report that effectively your office funded in the sense of the research, it actually lumps in trained police officers, sworn officers, with private officers and private security guards. And Commissioner, I think you would, hopefully you would agree with me that there is a fundamental difference between a sworn police officer who has years and years of training and experience to probably a non-unionized minimum wage security guard sitting in a US school. And what also troubled me, Commissioner, is in that report that again was built on the research for your report. It not only talks about public K-12 schools, but it lumps in private schools and post-secondary schools. So what we're doing here is we're really, unfortunately, I think reading the actual facts here. I think that we're clouding the issue by pulling in some of these reports. I'm gonna leave it at that. I want to say though, and again, I want to go back, it is from my opinion, it is your report that's preventing school police liaison officers to be here in Victoria. I am very pleased that in Vancouver, they have been able to come back to the table with that school district and reimagine a program where the school district and the Vancouver Police Department have reimagined a system. I think that from what I understand, it's working. And Commissioner, there's no emotion here, but from my perspective, I would ask that you actually help us work with School District 61 to possibly reimagine a program here for school police liaison officers in Schools District 61. At the end of the day, I am hearing over and over that children are not safe, children are at risk. And I don't think we can collectively stand idle knowing that. And Commissioner, I ask for your help getting there. Thank you.
Commissioner, do you want to respond?
Yes, please. Thank you, Paul. There's a few things I just wanted to clarify. So as much as I would like to take sole credit for this decision, I certainly agree with the decision of the school board. In fact, they've detailed, and I believe in a letter to you, to this board, but certainly publicly, the many ways in which they sought feedback, the extensive consultations that they did as a result of their striking a committee. So I think I won't speak for them. They need to be able to speak for themselves. I would urge you to look at that letter and what they've already listed as the extensive work that they are relying on. And I think it's really important to note that while we heard some very compelling stories earlier, and those are important for us to consider, lived experience is important, but data needs to back that up. So we haven't heard any data. This board does not produce data or heard data that backs up this program. There is not evaluation data to show the success of this program. There is not the data that I am calling for, which puts the voices of marginalized students at the center of it. You've called into question some of the data in the US, And I'm not here to defend that data. What I'm saying is there are two reasons to be concerned about SLO programs here. One is that data from other jurisdictions shows that there are some concerns, and there is a lot of research from the US that does talk about police in K-12 in the K-12 system. So there's no question there is extensive research in the US. There isn't the research here in Canada. That's exactly my point and my call to action. If you did that research and found that in fact this served the entire student body, including marginalized students, then I would absolutely agree with it. I'm calling for evidence-based decision making, and I think that's really important to recognize. The other reason that we're saying I'm concerned about the SLO program is because we do have very compelling data in Canada and BC in particular to show that there is systemic racism in policing activities, in certain policing activities in particular. So it is important to know that students are seeing that activity around them impacting their communities. Excuse me. So, I mean, I won't sort of try to respond to everything comprehensively. I know this conversation was supposed to last 20 minutes and we're an hour in, so I want to be respectful of your time here, but I did want to clarify those couple of points.
Commissioner, thank you. Dale,
I
you have a question?
I had a comment. I think that SLO is such an emotionally charged issue. And I hear you talk about the need for evidence-based research. And, you know, certainly I also am a believer in evidence-based research. And in your letter, you asked the Minister of Education and the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, you urged them to commission research so that can help move us along. And I'm just wondering, has there been a response to that? Because I think we need to focus on providing some research to support where we want to go.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have received a response, and the latest response from the Solicitor General suggests that there will not be that research forthcoming. I think that would be different if police called for it as well. But unfortunately, that has not, we have not seen success on that recommendation, which I think is really unfortunate. I do want to, sorry, there was one other point that I wanted to make, which is in relation to the level of fear in community. And I think police are particularly well placed to know that the conversation in community and fears in community don't always match crime rates. And that in fact, over the last number of decades, fears around violent crime have far outstripped the rates of violent crime. As violent crime has gone down, fears have gone up. So that's an important context for us to remember about again, kind of evidence-based decision making and the role that police might have in reassuring communities about what's happening in community that actually matches the data.
Holly?
Thank you for the question.
Hi there, my name is Holly Courtwright. I sit on a board. In my background, I have a master's degree in human rights. So I am just curious, as kind of the primary tenet around human rights is that we listen to understand versus listening to respond. So the fact that you showed up today with a prepared response to our presentation is concerning to me, because I would hope that you would have listened to understand and then asked questions rather than report. We've read your letter, we've read the reports, we're fully aware. So that is a bit concerning to me. The second thing is that any reference to policing in the United States it's really challenging for me to take that seriously. We are in a much different environment, and that tells me that you are missing some evidence-based data as well, if you are required to go to the States in order to get that data that you need. The third thing is, how are we meant to gather the evidence-based data in a program that is not running? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how you would expect us to collect the data that you're asking for in a non-existent program. Where would you like us to get the data from? Thank you.
So just to be clear about expectations, when I was invited to this meeting, I asked for the agenda. I was told, what would you like to see? I suggested having 7 minutes to speak, having 7 minutes for someone on the board to make a presentation and having 5 minutes for conversation. That was accepted without any question. I understood that that was a collegial agreement. And I arrived today to have that not clearly play out the way that I expected. So it was really a matter of expectations that I arrived here with some notes, as I thought indeed that was what we were doing here. And I couldn't agree with more with you that we are missing data and that we can't rely solely on the US data. That's exactly what I'm saying here. It's a call to action for data. And there are SLO programs running across the country and very recently here in Victoria. So you could actually do the research based on the students who have been enrolled in this program, the experiences of families who didn't disappear in a puff of smoke, in fact, still exist, and many of whom will still be in your community, as well as doing BC specific research. I will note that the call to research is to the province. I think it's important that it be done by the province actually, and be able to be relied on by school boards and police boards across the province. So I would my ask to you is actually to support that call for data, which again is not really about one particular agenda here. It's really about supporting evidence-based decision making, which again, I think I don't imagine that anybody in this room would argue with the fact that policing in our criminal justice system needs to be evidence-based.
Commissioner, I want to be respectful of your time as well. Clearly, the extra time was not in your expectation. If it's okay with you, I'd like to look once more around the board table for any last question. But I want to thank you on behalf of the Victoria and Esquimalt Police Board for your honesty and speaking to our questions. And you can hear that this is extremely emotional, and we are very passionate about ensuring the safety of our communities. So I do have one further question, and this is from a member of the executive of our police union. And would you be okay to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, sorry, my name is Tom Santagas Jr. I sit on our board for the union, and I apologize, I wasn't privy to the actual document, so I didn't read it. But my question is, in this evidence-based studies that you've done and ultimately made your decision, which would be maybe a mitigating factor in making your decision, were there comparisons or studies done between the differences between police agencies, Canadian and American, to outline that trauma-based training that a lot of Canadian police departments and officers have conducted against, say, what training has been done for Americans, which would help guide you in making that decision? Like, were those taken into consideration with your study? I mean, I know the data it's American based, but my question is, it's known what training Canadian officers do and what American officers do, and it can be compared. Was that ever taken into consideration when making a decision on how Canadian SLO programs would be guided?
Well, actually, the real gap is that there's not a lot of Canadian research on this, which is exactly why I'm calling for this. So it's not that I've reached a decision about the value of SLO programs. I've looked at the existing evidence and said there's a significant gap here. We have enough reason to be concerned about potential harms, so we need to do the research to understand those harms. So it's not a decision that SLO programs are bad. It is a decision that more research is needed given the high level of concern here. In terms of the training,
my question is more surrounding the training that officers, like the differences between Canadian policing and American policing, like the training officers get.
No, I appreciate the question, and I think it's an interesting point for research. I mean, I would raise the concern of what came out in Vancouver, that in fact, it had been stated a number of times that there was specialized training when in fact there wasn't, which was revealed through an FOI request of a journalist, and revealed that in fact there wasn't specialized training. I don't have that information for this police this police jurisdiction, so I can't speak to that. I'm sure you can. But I would say just that because there isn't that research in Canada, there hasn't been that comparison. but it's an interesting question to add to the mix.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending. We will let you go. And I really appreciate hearing from you and you listening to us and our concerns and answering our questions.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Take care.
Bye.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'm wondering if we could take a 10-minute break just to allow our guests to leave and or 5-minute break.
We will take a 5-minute break. And we
Let's do it.
are now over time, so anyone who wishes to leave at this point, feel free and we'll go from there.
I know, yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Because. There is data in the survey.
Still valuable, still appreciated.
Minutes, please. I would look for a motion to adopt the minutes. Holly, seconder, Tim. Are there any errors, omissions, or changes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion's carried. I am going to do the review of the board's strategic priorities. We'll move that to August meeting. FYI, there will be a police board meeting in August 20th. Next we have the, board co-chairs update. Co-chair, Aldo, any updates?
As I said earlier, I believe everything I would like to say, the chief will share.
All right, so we'll, then go to, I have, nothing to add either. We will go to committee's update and, I will look to the committee chair of finance, which was the only committee that met, last, term. Or last month, this month. Sorry, you have under your, item, it's the proposed process timelines for the budget.
I was busy trying to put that date for the August meeting into my calendar before it escaped me. The finance committee is chugging along on the 2025 budget. We've started community consultation. We met with the Esquimalt Council last night. We're going to be meeting with the great council early second week in September. There's lots of work obviously going on inside the department to build up the budget, to see what the needs are, what changes have happened, where our pressures are. The committee has not actually seen that yet. We will see that later this month and proceed from there. So in the fall, when we get to we'll get to October, we will have a joint council and board meeting where two councils are there, and we will be doing a full presentation of our budget at that point. Lots of opportunities for the councils to ask questions. And after that, there will be decisions made by each council in the final budget how they approve. And as I've said to both councils, as finance committee chair, I and the people who are working on it on behalf of Vic PD will meet the councils as often as they need to answer the questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And, yeah, we met with the Esquimalt Council last night, and there was some good sharing of information. Any questions on the finance committee? All right, seeing none, we'll move down and we have the letter from PSSG regarding.
You not have the chief wants to go.
Oh, yes, sorry, we added the other item. Thank you for that. Chief.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. Deputy McRae, can I turn it over to you just to provide an update on the 900 block and what our action plan's looking like, and then maybe you turn it over to me at the end for some final comments. Thanks.
Obviously, on Thursday, there was a significant incident in the 900 block of Pandora Street. It's been widely reported in the media. On Friday, we held an emergency meeting with the leadership of the Victoria Fire Department, the leadership of the Provincial Ambulance Service. The Mayor of Victoria was good enough to attend, as well as police leaders from Vic PD. The conclusion of that meeting, the Victoria Fire Department and the Provincial Ambulance Service confirmed and let us know formally that they would require police attendance with them to any calls in and around that area, in that immediate area, for their safety. There is some significant safety concerns. This is something that we have seen building for some time, and in fact, in some of our conversations with service providers, we have learned that it is something that they have also experienced in and around this area recently. In order to move forward with that, at this point, we are accompanying anytime ambulance and fire attends, we are accompanying them to that area. This is something we don't want to be doing for an extended period of time, and we'll be working over the next couple of days to build a plan for certainly for the short and medium term in order to have increased police presence in that area, improve life for the vulnerable community that is living there, make sure that we are providing support to emergency services who need to go there to help save lives. And we'll be doing this, making sure that we're doing that in with the mindset of community safety. I also want to just be very realistic about our mandate. Our mandate is to help provide public and community safety. We won't be resolving and solving the homeless crisis, the opioid crisis, or the mental health crisis that this province faces, or that this city is dealing with. This is a public safety matter. We have a part to play in dealing with those bigger crises, but at the front end of this is a public safety matter that will be addressed. For you, Chief.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that, Deputy. And just through you, Chair, just a couple of public comments that I'll have is that you've heard these comments kind of play out to the media, but clearly what happened on Thursday night was unacceptable. It was unacceptable that frontline responders, paramedics in this case, the individual was attacked. The fact that we had to have our firefighters form a human shield to kind of protect the paramedic from being further assaulted. When our officers arrive on scene, they're basically swarmed. There's a mob mentality. We have to call for extra cover, and up to 40 officers respond. What it really tells us is that we need to hit the reset button, and we are going to do that. We need to have a plan that is going to be realistic, but that's going to increase our presence in the block. From the news release that went out earlier today, with the recovery of a loaded handgun with an extended magazine, with the weapons, the machetes, the hatchets that we found within that 900 block of Pandora, I can tell you that it's clear that what we're finding is, one, it's not a one-off, but two, it really is indicative of the criminal element that is embedded itself within many of these supportive housing locations, many of the outdoor sheltering sites, including the 900 block of Pandora. And it's important that the police work with all of our partners. I want to just extend that Mayor Alto. I've literally been talking to her every single day since this incident. The city has been responsive, and I know they've got a motion coming forward perhaps on Thursday. Any help that the city can give us in getting health, housing, social providers to the table is going to be advantageous, because what was not a police problem has become a police problem, and we need all of our community partners there. And the final thing I'll just comment on through you, Chair, is that the response that you are going to see from the Victoria Police Department, it will be measured. It's going to be well thought out with reasonable expectations, and it will respect human dignity, and we will make sure that we do it in a proper professional way that you would expect our police officers to do it in. It goes without saying, but I think that there is going to be a bit of pushback from those that are our critics, that are going to look at the police in the block of what we're doing. But you do need to get control of the situation as it currently stands. And I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And just before I open it up for questions, I'm going to ask our EA to write letters of thanks to each of the other jurisdictions that came to our assistance on Thursday. So they will follow through. Questions for Deputy McRae or the Chief? Paul.
Well, Mayor, I just want to say, kind of go off of your issuing thanks. I want to thank the frontline Big PD officers who responded. I am very proud of them. They went well beyond the call of duty, and so just from my perspective as a board member, I want to say thank you. I also want to say thank you to those frontline ambulance paramedics and firefighters who also went beyond the call of duty. You know, at the end of the day, and I'm pleased to hear the chief's working on a report, but the health and safety of our employees, our frontline officers, to my mind, it comes top priority. And certainly through the chief, I certainly want to be apprised of ensuring that our officers are safe. And if there's something the board needs to do beyond, I certainly would like to hear about it so we can take action appropriately. You know, everything else is secondary. Health and safety is important, but I'm glad you're working on a plan, and I am glad to see union representatives here from the officers. So I know that they will be working as partners in this. We're in this together, but I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you for closing that circle. Absolutely, we want to make sure that our members know we're very grateful.
Sean has a question.
I have Tim first and then you, Sean, okay?
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, Paul, and for stealing my words and thoughts because I think it is really, members first, and thank you to everybody that showed up, how they showed up. It is always, I know, with kindness, compassion, care, but we're all human, and I think they go home with some of this. So again, Chief, we would like to know that the members are taken care of adequately. And again, as Paul mentioned, I will through maybe even our HR committee here, how to support members properly through this. The other question is maybe why now? Why this sudden, and I don't know whether it is sudden, but you mentioned that, I think the words you said, Deputy, was the actual, not the population or Pandora not wanting support in saving lives. And I think that was, I wrote it down, but I can't find my words right now. Is this changing, and why is this changing? Why is this particularly negative towards first responders and police?
Yeah, I mean, it's a negativity we've been seeing build over the last several months. It's a great question as to the why. When you have first responders, firemen, if I just take the paramedics, for example, whose sole purpose is there to help save and support people. The police officers who come there, even while we were dealing with this particular matter, another overdose happened, and it was a police officer who administered Narcan to save that person's life. It's their sole purpose is to sort of support and help people. Our place, for example, when they're having challenges with their own medics and with their own people, staff, and some of the issues that they're having. The why is a great question. It is probably something we don't have a for sure answer on. There is some suspicions and some concerns. One of those is around entrenchment. One of those is around, just a core group of bad actors who might be living within the vulnerable population, who they take advantage of that vulnerable population to build and get into a little bit what I would describe as the mentality. But that is, you raise a great question as to the why, because the sole purpose of many of us is to help.
Anything further?
I don't think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, just before I go to you, Sean, the chief just wants to respond as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just timely for the board. I know times are the essence here, but I'm gonna actually ask Staff Sergeant Jan Malinowski to speak up. B-Watch was working that night, and Jan was actually the on-duty staff sergeant working. So she was responsible for the response, and she debriefed with the members of the watch after. Jan, do you want to just share some comments with everyone?
Sure. So I mean, definitely a very traumatic event for the members on the ground. Seeing the support from the outside agencies really went a long way for the shift. Just seeing that response, and it was just a quick call over the air, and everybody went, I didn't even have to make any calls. So just that response was just amazing. Checking in with the members that night. Everybody is doing well. We come together as a family. We were able to actually share a meal just for 20 minutes, just a quick little before we had to get back to all the calls that had been stacked. And then that shift is actually on again today. So just some follow up with everybody that was there. Everybody's back to work and in pretty good spirits. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, chief. Sean, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for their questions, and thank you, Jen, for your work. Being there that night and evening, and thank you for looking after the membership. And I imagine what was quite a traumatic experience. Now I can say probably that I'm hoping that our folks in the ambulance and fire also have similar supports as well. So I'm going to ask a quick question to Deputy McCray. So one of the things you mentioned was to figure out a path forward. Not only with Victoria Fire, with of course the city. And of course the ambulance and service providers, for example, all hands on deck is sort of what I'm sort of hearing. So do you have, and then perhaps it's early days yet, have you had conversations with some of the service providers in and around that area? And if so, are there additional conversations happening with other service providers that are nearby we talk about 900 Pandora particularly in this instance, but I'm wondering if you've seen this trend across Greater Victoria, or sorry, Esquimalt and Victoria, not just localized with one particular end. So two questions. One, are you seeing this fortuitous trend across Greater Victoria and Esquimalt? Secondly, are you able have you had conversations with service providers, or will you be having more in the future?
Yeah, so
thanks.
I can cover both. Thank you for that, Sean. The first question, are we seeing this trend elsewhere? We are. Another heavily entrenched area, the 500 block of Ellis Street. So we have had a couple of building incidents there in the past couple of months. And then the second question on connecting with other service providers. It just happened to be that I had a meeting with the chief and Julian Daly today from our place. But no, other service providers haven't yet been touched base with, but you should expect to have that happen over the coming week to 2 weeks here as we continue to build and expand upon our presence in and around that area.
All right, any further questions on this report? Chief, did you have anything else?
No, that's it, Chair. Thank you for the
Okay.
time.
All right, thank you. We go down to new business and we have the letter from PSSG regarding training requirements and standards. And I have Deputy Laidman under this one, but I don't see him.
I've got that, Chair. Yeah, so the letter that's in your package is really a follow-up to a letter that was sent in 2022 regarding some provincial policing standards. And all really government is asking for is just an update. And this is specific training towards Indigenous cultural awareness. The province has put standards in place that every police officer will have this training by the end of the year. And they're really just looking for an update from the different training units from the various police agencies. How far along are you? Are you going to be able to meet the timeline and making sure that the provisions are in place? And I can share with the board that our training unit through Ms. Chris Kosich is well aware of this. We're well on our way, and we've got reminders and diary dates that we've set well in advance of the provincial diary date to make sure that we meet the standard that's expected of all police officers at VPD.
Thank you. Is there any sense of percentage that have done it to date or?
I think we do have that number, but we're going to start pushing that. I think we're up at the 25-30% range right now, but we're way ahead of what the standard where it needs to be met. But we're going to make sure that we're going to get it done well in advance of the deadline the province has set.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions on this? All right. Next up is the 2024 MOOIC number 467. It is in your package. Basically, this is a replacement to the order in council from 2002. And you can remember that several times Marianne and I have indicated that we're special here. And we are. Because what was determined by the province is that the changes in the Police Act would not necessarily apply to Victoria and Esquimalt because of the order in council. So this is new order in council that allows those changes to comply, for us to comply with those changes. And so you will have read that we too will have our councils choose a member to come to the police board. And that is expected to be completed and here for the next meeting, which is in August. And at which time, according to the Police Act and the OIC, we will vote for a chair of the board. Open to any questions to either of us, but basically it's right in front of you and we're now not so special. At least in this. Okay, no questions. So next month, election of board chair and vice chair. Next up, we have Esquimalt Council response regarding the proposed expansion of MQ. I will just slip the hat and speak to the letter maybe, and that's the way of introducing this. Esquimalt Council, having heard through Mr. Moran from the province on this issue, indicated that they are interested in learning more, don't have enough information. The province did set a deadline of July 19th, I believe, to be able to respond. So we had that conversation. And we're really looking to you as police leaders and leadership to provide us with more understanding on VIMQ as it is now, what is happening with this new unit. And so it's really a letter of request to say, please come and talk to us and share your thoughts on this so that we can make informed decisions. It's my understanding as well that the people from police services who are in charge of this are willing to come and speak to councils and the board if we wish. And I would suggest that, given the fact that I'm just going to go out on a limb here, I was the only member of the board or councils that attended this. We had 2 officers there, and that was great. But it might be an opportunity having them come and present such that our leadership can have questions and conversations as well as the board to inform ourselves more on what exactly is going on around this, given that this went to municipalities as opposed to usually coming as we expected to come through our police department. So open to any questions around the letter, but then look to the chief to provide any further information. Okay.
Sure. Just to your chair, referring to the letter and the request, I did speak to your CEO last night, and I got a little bit more background on the letter itself. And I think it is a great suggestion. Your council's not really aware of the different financial implications and the model and what different options exist. And so I think that through the board EA, we can book a meeting on your council's availability. And what I'll do is I've got Inspector Connor King here, my Deputy McCrae, and also Staff Sergeant Mike Darling. And we can come with a small contingent and do a little bit of a presentation. I actually know what he's looking for and the type of information that he feels council will benefit from. So we'll make sure the presentation is tailored to that.
Okay. I don't know whether Victoria is interested in that.
I'll make that search for sure. We have received a letter. We have a fairly fulsome conversation about a potential response, which is being drafted currently. Along similar lines as what Mayor Sharp suggested. Although I will suggest that there is probably a more declarative tone about our current satisfaction with how the services are being run locally as well, and a certain inclination to be puzzled about whether or not the change that's being proposed, as we understand it, would benefit Victoria or Esquimalt. So I think you'll see a slightly more resistant tone in the letter when it finally arrives.
Okay. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one final comment on it. I have spoken to my counterpart chiefs in this. The increase for the Saanich Police Department for Vic PD, just the increase is over $2.6 million. That's not the cost of the unit, that's just the increase into 2025. The impact to the Saanich Police Department is $1.9 million. The impact to the West Shore RCMP is $1.5 million. And I've spoken to both Superintendent Todd Preston and to Chief Duffy. Both are in similar conversations with their boards and with their councils to find out how are they going to fund this. And I got some information from them, but I don't want to really share in the public session here. But this is a really significant challenge for municipalities and police boards to fund these level of increases into a following year. So it's not just our board and our department and our councils concerned about it. This is being shared regionally.
And I think the question that needs to be asked of the province is, you know, how firm is this? Again, I would request that the board consider having a presentation whereby we can all be in the room and hear this information. I heard it, scared the heck out of me. The inspector was there. So I would hope that you'd want to put forward a motion that we invite them to come and speak to the board. Elizabeth, you had a.
Yeah, you just stole part of what I wanted to say, but I think it's really important that we take the time to understand exactly how this is going to impact us. And obviously, as chair of the finance committee, I'm very concerned because I know how little burden we have to add, what almost a tripling of the budget that we now spend on to this. I'm also somewhat, or not somewhat, I'm quite concerned about the way this was presented to us. It went to the municipalities, the assumption was you were gonna pay for it. It wouldn't hurt the police budget, I believe that's what the chief told us, it wasn't, the implication was that it wasn't gonna come out of our budget, of course it's gonna come out of our budget. So I've asked the chief to do some work to give a really good analysis for our finance committee of how this might impact things that we come ahead. But I do think that your suggestion of having a presentation on why this is being proposed, what the benefits would be, and how the costs have been allocated across all the police departments is a wise one, and I think they're doing.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Hands all over the place. Good. All right, any discussion on this?
Yeah, no, look, I'm glad the chair of our finance committee is watching this. You know, the chief just outlined those numbers, and I mean this is alarming given the budget problems we've just had here in our board. But $2.6 million trying to find that, I just think it's not possible. 1.9 for Sandwich, 1.5 for West Shore. I'm very concerned about this, and I think the province needs to come and explain why this is happening, and actually explain why the funding model that they've is the way that it is. But this is a serious problem that we're going to need to address, and I hope that the letter that we send, it actually uses the words have a meeting with them as soon as possible, because I think we got to get ahead of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the deadline is not hard and fast on the 19th. So we can certainly try and get this sooner rather than later, because as we're all going into our budget processes.
I don't want to prolong this, but I want to be clear, you know, there's two things here. We need to draft this letter. We need to get somebody to come talk to us, but I also think we need to do our own internal analysis. It's not just the lump sum, but what does this actually mean? What does it mean to our budget? What else would we have to give up to make that work? Knowing what the municipality and what Squamish has already told us in terms of their priorities, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hear similar things from the Victoria Council, and we should not kid ourselves. This could have a very negative impact on our ability to do.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion's carried. We have a letter of appreciation from PSST from Glenn Lewis to Detective Constable Olson. So I want to acknowledge that. And the other correspondence we have is the response that we got from School District 61 to our offer to coordinate. And I had this put on the agenda because I think that we need to have an understanding of where, perhaps Chief, I'm going to put you on the hot spot, where do we go from here?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that. So just for the public and those that maybe haven't followed the email chain or the letters, we received a letter for data from the Victoria Police Department, from School Board 61, Board of Education. That a similar letter went to other police jurisdictions that also police or have schools within SD 61. And what we've decided to do is have a kind of a coordinated response instead of each individual agencies responding. The methodology matters. We want to make sure there's a consistent approach and a response to it. So the board, as you know, wrote back and said we need more time because the timeline was set for, I think, the end of last month. And then we will give you the response that you're looking for, but it'll be done in a coordinated manner, knowing that there's 4 police jurisdictions where SD 61 schools reside. They've now sent this letter. I think what we have to do is we need a bit of flexibility to provide the data in the way that it's going to make the most sense, but we will take into account the letter that we have just received in the board package. But it's very difficult. There, SD 61 Board of Education is asking the police department to divide up data in a way that maybe works for them, but it isn't necessarily the best way to deliver the data. So leave it with us. We'll take it into account and we'll make sure that they get what they're looking for in the way that they want. It may not be exactly 100%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that response. Any questions for the chief on this? All right, we do have a member of the public that has requested to be able to speak. I will introduce, it's Marcy McLean, and you can introduce yourself as well. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'll disclose that I am a District of Highlands Municipal Councillor and am a CRD Commissioner on the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. However, this evening I'm not representing either of those. So municipal councillor. So on the matter of the BC Human Rights Commissioner's letter of November 24th, 2022 to the BC School Trustees Association, Commissioner writes, in her capacity under section 4712, parentheses 1, parentheses C of the Human Rights Code, which provides that the Commissioner is responsible for promoting and protecting human rights, including by making recommendations or using other means the Commissioner considers appropriate to prevent or eliminate discriminatory practices, policies, and programs. Additionally, for clarity, from BC legislation, section 4712, parentheses 1, parentheses small a, the BC Human Rights Commissioner is responsible by doing any of the following clauses, which is parentheses A2, parentheses L, subclause. A states identifying and promoting the elimination of discriminatory practices, policies, and programs. My point, humbly, from my perspective, has the Commissioner identified what discriminatory practices and policies she is addressing under the legislative requirement? Additionally, from the BC Human Rights Commission website, under their vision and mandate, it states, vision, province free from inequality, discrimination, and injustice, where we uphold human rights for all and fulfill our responsibilities to one another. Their mandate states to address the root causes of inequality, discrimination, and injustice in BC by shifting laws, policies, practices, and cultures. We do this work through education, research, advocacy, inquiry, and monitoring. Based on that information, and from the Commissioner's recommendation in her letter, it is unclear to me that mandate is being respectfully applied to the BC School Police Liaison Officers programs. Further, legally speaking, there is no legislation provincially or federally regarding students' rights, which the Commissioner's letter also speaks to. The United Nations Declaration of Rights for Children is, of course, not the same or applicable as students' rights. A Greater Victoria School District 61 Board of Education has the results from the respondents to the SPLP survey let's reevaluate using this local data for Greater Victoria. Thank you for listening. I wish she was here.
Thank you very much. I am drawing to a close. There is no rise and report today. So I will look for a motion to adjourn. Holly and Elizabeth, all those in favor? Any opposed? Anyone opposed? No way. Next item.